Good morning. Hope you've had a great weekend and are ready for a great start to your day. To your week even. It's Monday morning. It's great to be with you as we continue studying together in the Gospel of John. Today we're going to pick up where we left Friday. Friday we looked at that great love story of the woman caught in adultery, where Jesus said he was without sin, cast the first stone. So today we will pick up with verse 12. And we're gonna continue in a similar theme that we dealt with in chapter 7, and we're gonna kind of talk in a minute about why we see this theme here. So let's read with verse 12. Read 12 through verse 20. Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Then the Pharisees said to him, You're testifying on your own behalf, your testimony is not valid. Jesus answered, Even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid because I know where I've come from and where I'm going. But you do not know where I've come from and where I'm going. You judge by human standards, I judge no one. And even if I do judge, my judgment is valid. For it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. In your law, it is written that the testimony of two witnesses is valid. I testify on my own behalf. The Father who sent me testifies on my behalf. Then they said to him, Where is your Father? Jesus answered, You know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. He spoke these words while he was teaching in the treasury of the temple, but no one arrested him because his hour had not yet come. So we see this continued conversation we saw in chapter 7 about witnesses. Jesus said, uh, they said your testimony is not valid. You can't. You're just talking about yourself. You don't have. You need a witness to verify what you're saying. Remember, the Pharisees are teachers who were really immersed in the law. So they understood the law. They are seeing the Pharisees are seeing everything from a legal perspective. They are seeing things in terms of the law. They're seeing things in terms of what the law said and what the other religious leaders said, and they're seeing things through this lens, and they're not. Jesus is not speaking in terms of legalities. Jesus is speaking in terms of relationship. So Jesus says, I am I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So Jesus is speaking in terms of who he is, but then he's also speaking, as he says, his testimony about himself is valid because he is speaking not just on his behalf, but he's speaking on behalf of the Father. So for Jesus to say, well, first off, it's so hugely important that Jesus says, they're often called the I am statements of Jesus, where Jesus says, I am something. How many times does he say, I am something? So many times. Always pay attention when you're reading the Bible, reading the Gospels, when Jesus says, I am something. We don't think anything of that. That's a common phrase for us. I am, a preacher. I am a father. I am a husband. I am a sports fan. I am a this. I am a that. Very common phrase for us. It's a phrase of the definition of who we are. In Jesus' day, in the religious leaders' day, the phrase I am was a phrase that was reserved for God. Go back to Exodus. When Moses said, Who shall I say sent me? The Lord says, Say, I am who I am. I am sent you. So the phrase I am is a phrase in their tradition that was reserved for God. So when Jesus says, I am the light of the world, that instantly gets their offense taken antennas up because they're going to say Jesus is claiming to be on par with God. And by the way, you know what Jesus is doing? He's claiming to be on par with God. I mean, he, they are actually agreeing here. He is claiming to be on par with God, and they uh they don't do well with that. And so thus we see all this chaos and all these arguments, all this confusion because Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And they say, you're talking about yourself. Your testimony is not valid. They're speaking in legal terms. Jesus speaks in terms of who he is and speaks, as he said here, verse 18, if I testify on my own behalf and the Father who sent me testifies on my behalf. And they said, well, where's your father? They're thinking, where's they just they do not believe. They simply do not believe that Jesus is the Messiah, so they cannot hear. It's like he's talking to them, and there's just it's just like a bouncing off a wall. I'm rubber, you're glue. Whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you. I mean, like it's just he says it and it bounces back. They aren't absorbing it. They aren't getting it. They aren't hearing it. Because he says, you don't know me. You don't believe in me. You don't know the Father who sent me. You don't know these things. You know neither me nor my Father, for if you knew me, you would know my Father also. You don't know. We in our faith need faith and we need intellect. The Lord said we're to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. We're supposed to love God with our mind. We're not called to turn our brains off when we become a Christian. We're not. I believe that with all that I am. We're called to be educated. We're called as clergy to be educated. We're called as laity to be educated. We're called to be educated. But it's got to start with faith. It's got to start with faith. Faith is where it begins. As smart as the Pharisees were, as much as they knew, they couldn't receive what Jesus was saying. It couldn't even pierce their skin. It couldn't get to their hearts because they didn't believe he was who he says he was. They didn't believe him. It's got to start with faith. Some of the wisest folk I've ever met in my life sometimes were the least educated because they had faith. And that faith produced in them wisdom and understanding and truth. Started with that bedrock of faith. So if we don't have faith that Jesus is who he says he is, if we don't have faith in spirit to speak to us, then we're just reading words right now, y'all. We're just reading words. If we don't have faith and are going to church, it's just a ritual. Hebrews 11 says, without faith, it's impossible to please God because you can't please me. You don't believe he exists. And intellect can help with that. Reading can help with that. Knowledge can help with that. Y'all know I'm a skeptic at heart, and I read a lot of apologetics, and I like to think deep things on these things, but there just comes a point we have to surrender ourselves to God. Let go of our let go of our doubts and fears and worries and just surrender ourselves to God. And here's the thing. We got to do it today and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. They didn't believe. They didn't know. They didn't understand because they did not have faith. Faith makes it possible. Faith makes it possible. So today, as you take time reading scripture, as you take time reflecting upon scripture, as you take time meditating, as you take time serving, as you take time being salt and light, no matter where you find yourself, as you take time trying to be who God's calling you to be and love who God's calling you to love, um, starts with faith. So today, surrender. Even in doubt and fear and worry, surrender. God's got this. Even if you don't understand, surrender. God's got this. Even if you don't want to, surrender. Even if your intellect says, I don't know about this, surrender. Because it isn't until we surrender to faith that we'll ever really be able to truly learn, grow, and become who God's calling us to be. So today, surrender. as hard as it may be, as challenging as it may be, as much as you may not want to, surrender. And I promise when we surrender, faith will grow, our intellect will blossom, and we'll know. They didn't surrender to faith, so they could never learn. May we surrender, and in that may we find life. Hey, thanks for being with us. We'll pick up tomorrow with chapter 8, verse 21. Have a great day.